of mindfulness and compassion can transform our relationship to fear, how it can reconnect us with our most evolved and awakened being, with that open-hearted awareness. And Rich mentioned that this teacher training that I'm doing with Jack Kornfield, and we have people from 50 countries around the world that are participating. And it's been interesting to track the experience of the coronavirus from that perspective. And a number of students are from China. So several of them reported last week that the Chinese government had officially recommended that to reduce stress and support community during these times, everybody in China should practice mindfulness meditation. So I thought this was really wonderful news. Some of you might know that I'm with two colleagues. I'm currently offering a webinar, a mindfulness webinar to the House of Representatives and staff. So wouldn't it be great to have the official word come out that physical distance, wash hands, quiet your mind, and arrive in presence. May it be so. So as most of you are aware, one of the key gifts of mindfulness is to help us become aware of fear thinking. So much pain from fear thinking that gets spiraling and spiraling. So mindfulness helps us become aware of that. So we have the choice to come back home to our senses, to our breath, the sound, to our bodies. Fear is the anticipation of hurt, of pain that's coming, of loss that's coming. And the more fear thoughts, the more the biochemistry of fear gets activated in the body, and we get into a prison of this looping of worry thoughts, bringing up the anxiety in the body. So while fear itself is intelligent, I call it nature's protector, and we need it. When we have excessive fear thinking, we get caught in a prison of fear. The very word worry comes from Old England, strangle. I remember years ago seeing a little cartoon with a mother sending an email to her son, and it says, "Start worrying, details to follow." So we are like that. We're just absolutely get hooked in these cycles of fear thinking and our body getting revved up. And it creates a huge amount of suffering when we can't see in the moment that we've been lost in a kind of virtual reality. We've been believing our thoughts rather than living in what's actually here. The body lives in the present moment. There's a story of a couple from Minneapolis that went to Florida, decided to go to Florida to thaw out during a particularly icy winter. And they were going to stay at the same hotel where they'd spent their honeymoon 20 years earlier, but their schedules were hectic. So he had to go down on a Thursday, and his wife was going to follow on the next day. So the husband checks into the hotel, and there's a computer in his room. He decides to send an email to his wife, but accidentally he leaves out a letter, so it goes to the wrong person. Meanwhile, somewhere in Houston, a widow just returned home from her husband's funeral. And he was a minister who had been called home to glory following a heart attack. So the widow decided to check her email, expecting messages from relatives and friends. And after reading the first email, she screamed and fainted. And her son rushed in to see what was going on. And he saw on the computer screen, "To my loving wife. Subject, I've arrived. I know you're surprised to hear from me. They have computers here now, and you're allowed to send emails to your loved ones. I've just arrived and been checked in. I see that everything's been prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you then. I hope your journey is as uneventful as mine." And this PS, "Sure is freaking hot down here." So I share this with you because this is one of my favorite fun ones from the past, because we get lost in the virtual reality of what we're expecting. And while it truly is a dangerous time, the looping thoughts of worry actually trap us in a way that leads to the kind of fears that interfere with our executive functioning, making good decisions. They interfere with our capacity to really feel compassion for others. They interfere with a larger perspective that allows us to move wisely on our path. So mindfulness gives that capacity to begin to witness thoughts. These are just thoughts, and come back. Now, to expand on this, I'm going to be introducing, it'll be new for some, and many of you are familiar with it, but I'd like to work with the acronym RAIN, because what RAIN does is it weaves mindfulness and compassion in a way that we can apply directly to fear. And I've had many, many people talking to me over these last few weeks on how RAIN is actually helping them come back to a place of real centeredness and openness and tenderness, but not reactivity. So I'll introduce it to you first, and just to say that for those that want to do a deeper dive into RAIN, a shameless plug for my book, Radical Compassion, because it will walk you through a lot of different ways to customize it. And as with anything that works with our psyches, it needs to be customized. But okay, an introduction to RAIN. And as you hear it, each of the letters is a way that we're working with our body, mind, heart. And each one helps to undo what you might call the trance of fear, where we're in the grip. So recognize, that's the R of RAIN, means that we notice what's happening right here. And it really helps with recognizing to mentally note it. Fear, worry, agitation. Because the mental noting actually activates the frontal cortex and it reduces limbic dominance. There's a lot of really good research on how if we can recognize and name an emotion, we actually are not so in the grip. And the shaman put it this way. They say, if you can name a fear, it doesn't control you as much. So the first step of RAIN is to recognize. The second step is allow, the A of RAIN. And there's degrees of allowing, but in the most basic level, allowing means that there's an intention to let be for right now, to not fix or judge or ignore. And what allowing does is it gives us a pause. Many may be familiar with Viktor Frankl's wonderful description of the power of pausing. He said, between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. And in that space is your power and your freedom. So allow opens a space. And some of the tricks with allow is sometimes you can just say to yourself, yes, just this, what's here is here. And just acknowledge, yes, this is the truth for this moment. Let it be. I like to say, this belongs. Just like a wave in the ocean, it belongs. Or it's okay. So recognizing and allowing, naming what's here and making space for it is the grounds of mindfulness. Just to see where mindfulness fits in. In the RAIN meditation, the grounds are the recognizing and the allowing. And this is what enables us to shift from reacting to responding. Now, when there's a tight grip of fear, we need to continue on with the acronym. Sometimes recognizing and allowing itself creates the space we need. Investigate, the I of RAIN, means we bring a gentle and curious attention to what's here. It actually deepens mindfulness because it helps us contact the experience more fully. The biggest misunderstanding with the I of RAIN is that it's cognitive. You might think of the eye of rain as being 90% somatic, that primarily we're trying to discover and feel and fully contact the emotion as it lives in our body. As they say, our issues are in our tissues. So we're investigating the body. And there's a light use of the conceptual. We might ask ourselves or our clients, well, what are you believing right now? And then once the belief is named, how does it feel to believe that in your body? Or we might ask, how long have you been experiencing this? Or how has it affected your life? But then back to the body to sense, what is it like to know that? So the conceptual level of investigating is solely as a portal to experiencing what's in the body, wakeful contact. Investigating is what sets the groundwork for nurturing, the N of rain. Because as we investigate, we get more and more in touch with vulnerability. And the whole mechanism of compassion is, if we can touch the vulnerability, a natural tenderness arises. So we nurture from that tenderness, and it's active. We actively offer care to our inner life. And it may be that it's our own awake heart that's offering kindness. I'm putting my hand on my heart because so often it helps to offer it through touch. We might have certain words we use or an image. And the nurturing dissolves the sense of a separate, scared self. Nurturing actually allows us to feel the belonging that's so healing. There's a wonderful description from evolutionary psychologists that says it's not the survival of the fittest, it's the survival of the nurtured. So in rain, that nurturing allows us to feel the kind of belonging that really frees up the grip of fear, because fear is the perception of separation. It comes from the fear of loss of connectedness. So recognize, allow, investigate, nurture, and then the end of the process is what I call after the rain. And again, one of the biggest misunderstandings about rain is that we just go from rain into whatever's next. If we don't take the space for after the rain, we miss the deepest part of the transformation that's possible. You might think of it just like with a real rain, the gifts or the fruits of the rain are after the rain, everything starts blossoming. And that's the way it is in after the rain, where if we pause and just notice the quality of the presence that's emerged, we can sense the shift from when we started, the frightened self or the agitated self or the victimized self, to a space of kindness and awareness that has room for what's there. It's a shift in identity. And from a perspective of neuroscience, if we want to turn a state into a trait, if we want to turn that sense of feeling love and awareness into a trait of loving awareness, during after the rain is when we actually take the time to install that positive state. It goes into the long-term implicit memory by pausing and getting familiar with it. We start realizing that more than any story we've been telling about ourselves, this is the truth of who we are. Okay, a few more comments on rain, and then we're going to practice a little together, bringing rain to fear. One is that if fear is at the level of panic or trauma, if it's outside our window of tolerance, as our good friend and colleague and psychiatrist Dan Siegel puts it, outside the window of tolerance, we first need to directly calm the nervous system. We need to calm fight, flight, freeze, and reduce that activity of the sympathetic nervous system. Mindfulness practice isn't really possible, and it doesn't serve if we're outside the window of tolerance. So there are a number of ways that we can calm and soothe ourselves. We can, and this is again for ourselves or anybody we're with, encourage long, deep breathing, usually 5 counts on the in-breath, 5 counts on the out-breath, a kind of matched, long, deep breath for a few minutes, and it really shifts the nervous system. We can encourage grounding, where we actually feel the weight of our body, really the gravity that connects us with this earth. And grounding can include feeling the texture of what we're wearing, or feeling the surface of the desk, or naming the actual objects that are around us, because that brings us right back into the here and now. It takes us from the thoughts that are spinning and keeping us in that fear biochemistry to presence. We can actively nurture ourselves. The N of rain really can be and should be brought in as much as is needed. So sometimes we start with nurture, where we offer ourselves phrases of comfort, or we bring to mind someone who's a loving being and sensing them holding us, or we bring to mind a safe place. So all of these ways of calming the nervous system are in some way reconnecting with safety and love. Nurture throughout. It really makes a difference. When we think of what a child most needs, they need to be seen and loved. And rain is really a kind of spiritual reparenting, where we recognize and allow what's here, and we bring it a real tender nurturing. To say again that each of us has to customize. For some of you, when you investigate, you're going to find certain questions to pose to that vulnerable part of yourself. You know, what do you need? How do you want me to be with you? And that will help to create the connection and contact for nurturing. And then when we get to nurturing, we'll each find our own phrases that really speak to the particular needs of the vulnerability inside us. For many years, mine was, "It's okay, sweetheart." Just that simple. I'd put my hand on my heart and say, "It's okay, sweetheart." Or "Come home to love." But at times we feel too small to be able to nurture ourselves. And it becomes really important to know that nurturing can come from any source. We can imagine whatever larger source of loving resonates for us. I've often, when I felt really small, filled with grief or filled with shame, it was really, "Please love me," to whatever source of loving awareness in the universe I could reach. And at other times, there's a sense of nurturing by taking the fear and offering it into the universe, a kind of handing over. But maybe to ground this a bit, let me share with you a very recent practice of rain with fear. I've already mentioned that there's very real personal agitation around both what I sense coming up for very dear ones that I know, but also the sense of how many beings are vulnerable right now that are very likely going to suffer a lot. I think of my daughter-in-law was telling me about the tents they're setting up and how many people are homeless in that San Francisco area that are likely to contract the virus. The spread in prisons, the spread amongst people that can least find ways to be able to be taken care of. And so that was just creating a huge amount of lot aroused in me. So I often meditate by the Potomac River. I walk down there and find a boulder and sit down and practice. And I was feeling all of that. So I recognized it, agitation, fear, and allowed it, just, okay, agreeing to let myself feel it. And like many, when fear first comes up, it's not, I don't feel like this, yeah, let's make a whole lot of room for this. The first tendency is not wanting it to be there. And with these practices, there can often be a kind of a bargaining mind that says, okay, I'll be with you if you go away. But it knows. So the allowing starts with just this kind of agreement. Okay, I'm just going to allow myself to feel this. But then as I investigated and really asked, well, what is this like? There was a feeling of a real squeezing and a kind of crushing in my chest. And just to name that and feel that. And then there became this willingness to feel right into the epicenter of what felt most vulnerable. And so I felt right into the very heart of it, so to speak. And when I'm investigating, I'll often put my hand where I feel the fear. And that actually serves in two ways. It keeps me connected with the part of my body that I'm trying to pay attention to, because it's so easy for the mind to scatter. But it also is the beginning of nurturing. It offers a kind of comfort that I'm here with myself. So I was there just breathing and feeling into hard edges of where the fear was, and sense this kind of a surrendering of resistance to really opening to it. And when I inquired, well, what does this most need, this fear place? What it most needed was pure loving. And usually what's most needed is some flavor of loving. Needed that sense of belonging to love. Those were the words that came up, belonging to love. And so that was the beginning of nurturing, where I sensed the entire universe, but in a very kind of intimate way, this field of loving washing right into that place of vulnerability, bathing it, really saturating it with love. And the words that were in the background were beloved, beloved. And so there was this washing through, and one way to describe it is kind of like this ice cube that could start to dissolve with that washing through, but it didn't go away. There was still the feeling of it, but I started sensing it not as my fear, but it's the world's fear. And it might not go away ever. In the background, there might be that world's fear right here. But what was so apparent was that loving awareness was holding it. And there was a resting in that loving awareness. And this is where after the rain came in, because then there was just being that loving awareness, the kind of the ocean that's loving the waves, and getting increasingly familiar with just being that loving awareness, tender streams of experience moving through it. So I share this with you because it's very immediate, but also because rain is such a powerful tool for radical compassion. When I say radical compassion is embodied. It's not compassionate if we're just abstract in our mind. It's embodied. Radical compassion has an act of caring, an act of nurturing. And it's all inclusive. It's that sense of being that loving awareness and including all of the streams of pain, the world's fear in our hearts. Rain's never a one-shot. The good news is that it's the kind of pathway of awakening that becomes more and more natural and spontaneous the more we do it. It's also not always long. You can do a light rain, and you can teach your clients to do a light rain. And one of the reasons I wanted to spend time on rain as I was with you this morning is because it feels like in times like this, times of global crisis, we need practices that are very, very accessible and easy to remember that we can do, and also we can do with others. Many people in our programs that Jack and I teach are doing RAIN partners, and this is true in our DC community also here, and I have an audio guide for it on my website, where we do it together. It's a time when we're on virtual, we're on online, to do these practices that let us touch our vulnerability, but with each other, so we can awaken together in that way. One of the meditation teachers in our program described how she's using a light rain these days. And she says, when she feels agitation around the corner, she'll just recognize it, this, like something's coming up, something that I can't handle. She'll just name it, okay, fear, and allow it. And then feel where it is in her body and just do 3 long, deep breaths. Feel it. Send a message, come home to your heart, and then just stay quiet for a few moments. And she notices even in those 2 minutes, she's shifted. So let's practice together. I've spoken a lot about it. I'd like to invite you, as I did earlier, to, if you need to adjust how you're sitting in any way, to do so. Make yourself comfortable. And we're going to be doing a light rain, which means that if you feel drawn to it, you might practice some more when you have more time with it. Sitting quietly, you might close your eyes and take a few full breaths. And scanning your current life, bring to mind something that calls up some fear or agitation in you, but not something that takes you outside that window of tolerance, not trauma. It won't be so useful to you. It may be something to do with your own health and safety, or that of a loved one. It may be something to do with finances, with making the transition from how you're working, how you've been working, to whatever current way you're operating. Maybe something to do with the relationship that brings up fear. And when you have something in mind, take some moments to really remind yourself of the setting, or if it involves another person, their face, the words. So whatever it helps you to really connect with that which brings up distress, that which brings up fear. The beginning of fear, the beginning of rain, the R of rain is to recognize what's happening. So as you reflect on this situation, you might just sense, what's the worst part of this, and what's going on inside me right now? And notice whatever's predominant. It might be churning thoughts, it may be an emotion. Whatever's predominant, you might whisper a word mentally that names it. And recognize how it's living in you and the felt sense of the experience. And the A of rain, allow what's here to be just as it is. You might send a message to yourself just to let be this entire experience. It's a kind of willingness to pause and accept that these moments, what is, is. You might also, as I often do, say, this belongs. This is a wave in the ocean, it belongs. Creating that pause with allowing, you can begin to investigate with curious and gentle attention to explore what you're experiencing. You might sense again the worst part of this for you, and notice where it is in your body. Perhaps you can feel your throat or your chest or your belly. These are the places fear is often the most apparent. Wherever you feel it most distinctly, you might put your hand there as a way of keeping your attention with the fear and also offering nurturing. You might breathe with it. What does it actually feel like? Are you aware of heat or tightness or pressure, squeezing, twisting? Sometimes it's vague. Fear, the vulnerability and fear, like sometimes think of it like these shy creatures that stay in the woods, and it's not until we really invite them into the light of awareness, make it safe enough that they come out. So again, with your hand gently, wherever you feel some sense of it, you might invite the feelings to be as much as they are. What's really here? What perhaps have you been unwilling to feel before? And can you sense the willingness to feel now right into the epicenter, to where the intensity is, and breathe with what you're feeling, and sensing yourself feeling it and witnessing and accompanying. You might ask the place of vulnerability, what do you most need? Or how do you want me to be with you? Does this fearful part of you want understanding, acceptance, love, forgiveness, company, belonging? As you ask, also listen deeply now, because this is the beginning of nurturing, letting yourself attend from your most awake and wise heart. Call on the most evolved, compassionate presence that's paying attention right now. And as you sense what's needed, how do you want to respond? Perhaps there's a message to give to this vulnerable place. What does it most need to remember, to experience, to trust? Maybe they're words such as, it's okay, or I'm here and I'm not leaving, or trust in love, you belong. You might alter your touch so it's even more tender and gentle, so that you're actually sending a message with the touch to that vulnerable place. And you might also call on some larger source of loving, the love and wisdom that flows through someone you trust. You might bring to mind a friend, teacher, spiritual figure, your dog, some formless presence, and just sense that pure loving flowing through your hand into the fear. The secret is to bathe the fear in love. Let the vulnerability be embraced, held, bathed, washed through with love. Letting love into the cells and the spaces between the cells. As part of after the rain, you might sense the possibility of relaxing back and being that loving awareness. Notice the quality of the presence that's here. Like an ocean with waves on the surface, feel yourself as that tender, wakeful openness that includes this changing life. You might notice the difference between the experience when you began, that identity of a separate self, a beleaguered self, a fearful self, and this presence that's right here. Knowing this natural awareness and tenderness as the innermost truth of what you are. And taking a few full breaths. Opening your eyes as you're ready. So I want to thank you for taking the journey inward. That's really the first part of what we're exploring together, is how do we find that inner refuge of love and awakeness in being with fear. And the last part of what I'd like to explore with you is how do we then bring that radical compassion and presence to others. It naturally extends if we have opened to a heart space that can hold our inner life. That heart space includes each other, but let's look a little more particularly at that. About a week and a half ago, I did an interview with the Washington Post, and they asked me, so how is this for you? And I shared some of what I shared with you about the fears for the close in, and also the real deep fears for those I don't know, who I can sense how much suffering's going on and will go on. Then they asked what helps. And I talked about this practice, meditation, rain. I also talked about walking in nature, because spring is here and the wildflowers are coming up along the river. It's beautiful. But the thing I most talked about was the moments of being really real and open-hearted and connected with others. And there's a saying that originally was attributed to the Buddha. I'm not sure if it's from the Buddha, but there's truth. It's that our fear is great, but greater yet is the truth of our connectedness, our belonging, our oneness. And if we can remember and take refuge in that, we have room for fear. And if ever there's a time for refuge in Sangha, as the Buddhists call it, in our sense of community with each other, that's going to have the vastness and the depth and tenderness to hold what's going on. And as we know, there's a huge amount of research about how our connecting reduces fear. If you hold the hand of a loved one's, part of the brain correlated with fear and agitation quiets down. I heard a story of a little boy who was very scared during a thunderstorm, and he kept going to his parents' room, and they'd walk him back and put him back to bed, and his father would say, "You're safe, you're fine, God is with you." So after a number of rounds of this, little boy was put in bed, and then he said to his father, "I know God's with me, but I want someone with skin on." And we need beings with skin on. We need the connecting. And sadly, in contrast to other natural disasters, like having earthquakes and volcanoes and so on, a pandemic can be a setup for disconnection. And the reason is that the particular fears that the other is a danger to us, and then the physical distancing, and then the competition for scarce resources, it can create a lot of separation. And so historically, during pandemics, people have often been so terrified, so filled with dread, that they were unable to take good care of each other. The exception, the heroism of of healthcare workers. So it's a profound collective inquiry, and I feel like it's happening, that how we can awaken our hearts with each other, how we can make care and kindness and love go viral. There's a story I've always loved of Jarvis Masters. He's a prisoner at San Quentin, and he's also a Buddhist. And one day, a seagull landed in a puddle of water out in the outdoor area where he and other prisoners the other inmates were hanging out. And one of these young, big inmates picked up a rock to throw at the gull. And Jarvis instinctively raised his hand and said, "What are you doing?" And everybody in the yard got quiet and alert to see what would happen, because you don't mess with another person's private space in prison. It's at your peril. So Jarvis looked at this guy and then looked at the bird, and he said, "That bird's got my wings. That bird got my wings." And everyone kind of relaxed. The guy put down a stone, and for weeks afterwards, people were saying, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And I think we know. I think that's what we're experiencing, that this is what we're evolving to understand, this kind of mutual belonging in a cellular way, that we all want nurturing. We all want to love and be loved, and we all want to feel safe. And this is truly the time to realize that nobody's a stranger. And we need to explore that with each other on purpose, because I love the way Ruby Sales is a civil rights icon, and she recommends asking, where does it hurt when we're around another person? It doesn't mean we are asking it out loud, but we're wondering, what's it like being you? Because if we can move through the world and see the vulnerability that each person's experiencing, then we'll remember to extend our natural care. Now, as we know, we forget. It happens all the time. Each one of us gets caught in a kind of forgetting where we end up losing sight. We get caught in our own experiences of hurt and fear. And in those moments, we're unable to reach out because we're involved in ourselves. I'm looking for one thing I'd like to read to you if I can find it. Oh, well, it is gone. There's a well-known saying, and that is, everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. So this is the time to practice that, and this is going to be our last practice as we're going to be exploring this. But I'd like to name 3 domains where we can bring radical compassion to our world. And each one of them is a way that we can reduce the fear and cultivate love. And the first is, more than we have perhaps in the past, to reach out and connect and let it be real connection. Many people are doing online sitting groups and then sharing, what's it like to be in this together, being real. I mentioned rain partners. So one thing is just to reach out and connect and be with each other. And it can be in a lot of different ways. I was mentioning to Rich before we started that we can do Zoom kind of parties. He was mentioning dinner parties. I mentioned a friend of mine had been to 3 dance parties. So reach out and be with each other. The second thing I want to name is to reduce fear and increase love is to engage in ways that help. You know, when we're in trauma is a sense of that powerlessness, and there's a deep threat and a freeze. To heal trauma, to undo fear, we need to engage. And being of help really helps us to reconnect with our sense of resilience and empowerment. Reach out to someone who's lonely, contribute time, money, initiatives that can help others. I had friends that went on the bike trail last weekend, and for them it was just how many people can we smile at and wave at and feel a sense that we're all in it together. And of course they really, really were glowing from that. In Ireland, through tweeting, what went viral was looking for those elderly people that needed medicine and food and matching them with volunteers, reaching out. And the third thing I want to mention is we reduce fear and increase love by celebrating the goodness that's here. Please walk outside. The beauty of spring will lift you up, the dearness of those that you might be working at home with, the caring of so many people that really want to serve the good. A few days ago, or it's actually now it was last week in the New York Times, there was an article about Italy, and it went like this. It started with the national anthem. Then came piano chords, trumpet blasts, violin serenades, and even the clanging of pots and pans, all of it spilling from people's homes, out of windows and from balconies, and rippling across rooftops. Finally, on Saturday afternoon, a nationwide round of applause broke out for the doctors on the medical front lines fighting the spread of Europe's worst coronavirus outbreak. In China, patriotic truck drivers risked infection to bring desperately needed food to the people of Wuhan. In Iran, videos showed doctors in full scrubs and masks dancing to keep spirits up. It's happening all over, that we are remembering both being true to the pain and also remembering the goodness. This is a poem that's going viral that many of you may have heard, that we can reflect on together for a moment. And if it helps to close your eyes and take it in, please do. It's by Richard Hendrick, Catholic priest from Ireland. It's called Lockdown. Yes, there's fear. Yes, there's isolation. Yes, there's panic buying. Yes, there's sickness. Yes, there's even death. But they say that in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and gray and clear. They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to each other across the empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sounds of family around them. They say that a hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound. Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighborhood so that elders may have someone to call on. Today, churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick, the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbors in a new way. All over the world, people are waking up to a new reality, to how big we really are, to how little control we really have, to what really matters, to love. At times when things fall apart, as they are in our world right now, each of you has an essential medicine to offer. So that inquiry, who do you want to be? And what kind of world do we want? Become critical. Just as there's this viral contagion, it's crucial to remember that loving presence is contagious. We have this opportunity. We really have this opportunity to commit to making this a viral time of caring. First, finding that inner refuge and deepening our kindness and connection with others. So, my friends, in many different ways, we've all been training for this, to hold this living, dying world in our hearts and to respond with compassion and love. And it's in that spirit I want to have a final reflection together and invite you once again to close your eyes so that we can meditate, and to sense that you are joining with people around the globe, all of us caring about our world, all of us reflecting together. And you might sense, I asked earlier about your aspiration, what your prayer is right now. What is being called forth from you? To feel your prayer. To take some moments and scan and sense if there's anything inside you that needs a kind attention. And with whatever you notice, to whisper words of kindness to yourself, to whisper some message of kindness to yourself. To bring to mind someone in your life who's dear, who could use your healing prayer right now. And let yourself sense how they're struggling hard. How they're living with uncertainty and fear. And whisper your prayer for them, some message of care. It may simply be whispering their name and saying, I love you. May you be healed and free. And from this awakening heart space, bringing to mind someone who's different from you, someone you might forget is just like you. perhaps different in race, different in class, different in religion or political views. To not have this person be a stranger, to sense just like me, this being wants to feel safe, loved, happy, and free. And whisper a prayer. To sense that you're holding the earth or mother in your lap and all beings in your heart. And sense your prayer for our world. The poet Lynn Unger says, do not reach out your hands, reach out your heart, reach out your words, reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. Promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. So if your eyes are closed, please open them. I want to thank you all for your hearts, for your goodness, and for your presence. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thank you.